So today's program is certainly going to be a colorful program. So that's one of the reasons we put down the shades, and we're actually filming this program for the internet, so you can watch it again if you so desire. But with the shades down, it makes it a little better with some of the color in the colorized postcards. So, I've collected postcards, pretty much, Gettysburg postcards all my life. I'm not a postcard person. I don't randomly collect postcards of different sites. But I think I've always been interested in Gettysburg and collecting Gettysburg memorabilia. And, when you're a kid and you have limited funds, postcards were, something that I could buy at the attraction I went to, like a modern postcard, but also they were available at flea markets very cheap. And I think when I started collecting them, maybe they were like 10 cents each or, 25 cents each. And I would think I was horrified when I had to pay like $1 for one, So, but I'm also very organized in my collecting, and I have to learn a lot about the different things. I do remember that at first I only collected little round top postcards, and then I expanded to all Gettysburg postcards. But at first it was just a little round top, and so I had to learn a little bit about that. So just a little background on postcards. It wasn't until an act in 1898 that allowed people to put a stamp on a card and send it to someone. Prior to that, you could send a postcard, but it had to be one that was made by the post office that you bought for that purpose. It already came with the paid postcard, and you could write on one side and send it. At first, they were called, in 1898, private mailing cards. And you can see that this is from 1900, this particular card. And I think I have the front of it here. And you wrote your message on the front of the card. This is published by, you can see, J.H. Aville of Philadelphia. So this is one of the earliest, this may be the earliest card I have that I would consider a Gettysburg postcard. Again, they were called private mailing cards. In 1901, they actually, Congress issued an act that allowed private postcard makers to call them postcards. And you might notice on the back was only for the address. You couldn't put anything else on the back of the card, or else, I'd imagine they would threaten to throw it away. And so you had to write on the front of the card. And so here's one, and I think you can see it's from 1905. These are generally referred to in postcard collecting as undivided backs. So the undivided backs are from 1901 until 1907. And you can see this is, of course, I'm going to have, lots and lots of Lee's headquarters cards. This talk I'm going to give, it doesn't really have a beginning and an end. I noticed it's, I usually try to tell some sort of story. So since it doesn't really have an ending, I should say it's going to last about an hour and 15 minutes, theoretically. That's my plan. And then, so if you need to leave at any time, feel free to walk out. And hopefully I'll give lots of tidbits in throughout the program that you'll learn a little bit about it, about different subjects. I'm not as systematic in my collection of postcards as I would like, but there is a friend of mine who currently, and I was surprised to learn recently, even after I advertised this program, that he is completing a book on Gettysburg postcards. It's a catalog that gives the postcard companies and all the available known images from that company. And you might know on Facebook, I'm part of a Postcard Facebook site. And so on that site, you can find, it's called Gettysburg and Postcards if you're interested. We're going to advertise this book when it comes out. So it'll be like, for postcard collectors, it'll be something we've never had before, a checklist of all the known available Gettysburg postcards. And that's something that I think I've been kind of working towards for a long time, but I'm so busy and I have so many other, things going on that I'm not the one who's going to write a postcard book. I just enjoy the postcards very much. And here's another example. I think this is from the American News Company, and this is a view from Little Round Top. And, they did have real photos on the postcards, but the more popular ones, obviously, were colorized postcards, because people knew they'd seen black and white images, but to actually see a colorized image of a scene, really was exciting. I like this one on Little Round Top. Of course, there's the Gettysburg Electric Railway. There, the trolley running by. We're off on the side of the hill looking towards the wheat field road and into the wheat field. And, of course, the George W. Troxel House there, I believe. Or is it George Weichert? I always get the Troxels and the Weicherts mixed up. In 1907, we have an act of Congress that created the divided back. And then you could put the address on one side and you could write a message on the other side. That is, if the publisher of the postcard didn't put the description of the postcard right there in the middle, of course they started putting them on the top. But this is William H. Tipton and Company, and that's William H. Tipton's logo there. Some of the early cards, I have a lot of cards with the undivided backs, and obviously they're printed prior to 1907. The first series of postcards that was done was by the Detroit Photograph Company, and you can see that they're 1903. And these things are very collectible. I guess there's a lot of people that collect a certain postcard company. And so, that adds to the value of them. I see them on eBay all the time. And, you can buy a postcard, but you're going to pay more for the postage and handling than the value of the card, probably. These are numbered. And, that helps us understand the series. I think there were 17 different Detroit Photograph Company cards. And, of course, for the nerdy people, they're in 2 different formats. So even though there's only 17 different postcards, there's slight variations, and there's 2 different groupings of them. So it depends how you count, how many postcards there are. But if you count that as 2, and you instead of 17, you have, is that 34? So depending on how you count, and like I said, there's a friend of mine, I won't tell you his name, I don't want he hasn't given me permission to say that he's the one doing the postcard book. But he says that counting up all the cards and all the companies, and he only counted 17 with this company, there's like 2,500 different Gettysburg postcards available. And again, it depends how you count, as I'll talk about. But this view is really interesting because we're on top of the cemetery ridge tower where the Cyclorama building is. And of course, this tower was torn down in 1962 to make way for the Cyclorama building looking south down Hancock Avenue. And it's a view that I don't know if anybody in the room climbed up in the tower before they tore it down, but I never enjoyed that view. So postcards sometimes give you a view into the early Gettysburg National Military Park. Here's a couple other one of the Detroit Photograph Company cards from 1903. The Jenny Wade House Museum opened in 1901. And so here it is in 1903. And do you know, it wasn't until the 1960s they started charging money for the Jenny Wade House. It was a free museum. And, you know, some of the cards, like this one of Culp's Hill, shows Knapp's Battery, and it's in a little bit of a different location. And today the cannons are, there's not 3 cannons. And of course, you remember that, I don't remember when they were removed, but when I was a kid, there was a stack of artillery shells at every cannon on the battlefield. And there's my Lee's headquarters from the Detroit News, or Detroit Photograph Company. Rotograph was another company out of New York City that published early undivided back postcards. And the color on the rotograph is just really dramatic. And there's, of course, the Jenny Wade House. And you can see theirs are dated too, 1904. And they have a number. So you can, they're in a series, so you can buy them. Now, these companies that I just showed you, Detroit and here Rotograph, they produce thousands of postcards from, you know, all over the country and all over the world. And one thing that's interesting about the early postcards, again, a rotograph, is someone came to Gettysburg and took a photograph. Oftentimes, they just hired one of the local photographers I'll talk about, you know, Tipton or Mumper. But then they took that photograph and they sent the photograph to Germany. And I'd imagine, you know, at this early time, you know, it takes, you know, maybe a couple months to get to Germany. You got to send it by ship, and then somehow, you know, I don't know exactly how they're doing it. I guess New York City probably went right to one of the German ports. But then it went to Berlin or one of these other, Dresden I know is mentioned, and they printed the cards. The explanation for this has always been that the United States did not allow postcards to be mailed for a long time, but other countries did. And so other countries had developed elaborate systems for colorized images to be converted into postcards. And so most of the really nice postcards that were sold at Gettysburg were printed in Germany. So here's what boggles my mind. I don't know about anybody else. A cameraman takes a photograph. That photograph is developed, it's sent to New York City, it's sent to Germany, it's printed. And then the print of postcards are sent back to New York City and then sent back to Gettysburg to be sold in gift shops. The postcard has traveled all around the world before it's even sold to anyone. And I'll bet you it traveled, in the making of the postcard, it traveled further than it's going to be after it's mailed. These things just, you know, I guess, and we today, you know, kind of make fun of trinkets in Gettysburg shops that are made in China or Taiwan, you know, and then sold in Gettysburg. It's the same kind of thing, I guess. Yeah, these things, well, I have one that says 5 cents coming up. They sell for like a penny or 2 cents, or some of them 5 cents. So they don't sell for very much. So I guess, you know, they had to print run. They probably made thousands and thousands of them. That's why they're available in flea markets everywhere. I just love this view looking towards Big Round Top with the Big Round Top Tower. And you can see the guy in the carriage here. And this is not this is the Dinosaur Bridge, but we're at a slightly different angle. The road today is more on this kind of, you know, cross this way. And this is before. The Dinosaur Bridge is from like 1938 to 1940 era. I don't remember the exact date, but this is the earlier 1895 bridge. Interesting. So there are going to be some mistakes. That's part of my show. So we have mistakes. Yes, very good. So this one, I got this one when I was young. I couldn't tell you how young I was. Maybe I was a teenager. But for me, it was important to take the postcard out and find the exact location. Well, here's West Confederate Avenue. I'm sorry, but I don't remember anywhere on West Confederate Avenue where there's rocks. And I couldn't line this up anywhere. And then, of course, I learned, because I bought Pennsylvania Gettysburg, which has a map in it from 1904, that the original Confederate Avenue had a different course and route than the modern Confederate Avenue. And then, of course, I figured out right away, this is not West Confederate Avenue. This is South Confederate Avenue. And so I took a modern park map in the 1904 Pennsylvania map, Pennsylvania Gettysburg map, and I overlaid them. I made a transparency out of one. I had to make them the same size on a copier because I didn't have any computers. And then I was able to figure out where the original course of the road was. I went there, back in the woods on the slopes of Big Round Top, and I found these rocks. And of course, if you know about 15 years ago, I'd say maybe 20 years ago, the park redid the horse trail, and they put the horse trail on top of the old road bed. Of course, they destroyed some of the rocks in the process, but here's little Sam pointing to that rock that was on the right of that image there. So I found the image. And of course, different people like the postcards for different reasons. For me, it was always interesting to take out the postcards to the actual site and see how much things have changed. Of course, how do I know things have changed or they added something to the postcard that wasn't really there? That happens. But here's some of the rotographs. Here's Devil's Den. And I forget, Rotograph made over, I think they made over 100 Gettysburg postcards in the early days of the postcards. Most of them, well, some with undivided backs, some without. Here's I think I got that out of place. I think this might be William Tipton's Devil's Den. So you can see that one in there. Tux was another early postcard company out of New York City, and they produced I think 20 Gettysburg views. Now, again, sometimes the bottom description, this is, undivided back because, you have to write your message here. Sometimes this is in blue, and there's a series where this is in red. So they produced a couple years, probably different years, they produced the same cards and sent them to Gettysburg to be sold in our gift shops. But there's the Irish Brigade Monument. And we talked about the problems here. We're sending something to Germany and we're telling them what to put on the card. And somehow there was a horrible, horrible mistake. This is the American News Company, and this is their Lutheran Theological Seminary. When I showed this to Libby the other night, I was showing her my show, and her first thought was, why would you take a photograph from that angle with the tree blocking the building and the fire escape on the side? Couldn't you take a better photograph to start with? She didn't even notice the geological seminary. So, this is the building where you learn about the origin of Devil's Den, and we teach you about the diabase boulders that are crowded into the battlefield. I just think, I wonder how well this sold with that massive error on it. Or I can tell you today, talking to my postcard friends, this is like the most desirable postcard out there. The ones with the mistakes sell better. I have a few of them. So, but the Union, the American News Company the American News Company, they produced a bunch of really nice looking cards. And here's Little Round Top. I thought I'd put one on my Little Round Top. And you can see that, across the top there, this has obviously been run through the machine and it's posted. When I used to collect, I always wanted ones that were not posted because they are nice and crisp and clean and look better. And today, I struggle because I want to know the earliest known mailing of each of these cards so I can figure out what date the series was produced. And I wish I would have spent more time buying extra ones that were mailed. Today, that's much more important to me than when I was a kid. you're thinking like baseball cards, you want them in really good condition, not poor condition. But the dated ones help us learn more about the picture and the scene. Now, talking about maybe some mistakes, this is definitely one of my favorite postcards. I've been pushing for this one to be the most valuable Gettysburg postcard. I tell people that it is, and I make a big deal out of it all the time. So some of you probably heard me tell this story. Again, this is one I got as a kid, and right away I knew there was something wrong. General view of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania in 1863, and I love the back of the card. This picture is reproduced from the original photo taken by staff photographer of the U.S. War Department on July 1st, 1863, and shows Gettysburg exactly as it appeared on the eve of the great battle. So, first of all, there is no such thing as a staff photographer to the U.S. War Department, and there were no photographs taken on the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg. That's all incorrect. But beyond those obvious things, this is not Gettysburg. This is Fredericksburg, Virginia in 1864. I don't think you can see it's the same image. And I'd always, luckily I looked at a lot of books as a kid and knew most of the Civil War photographs and knew this wasn't Gettysburg. It's Fredericksburg, from the area today where the National Cemetery is, from Mary's Heights. In that same series, I should tell you, this is a card by a New York company, A.C. Boozleman. Sometimes on the back, they say ACB instead of ABC, ACB. It's very creative. But A.C. Boozleman. And here's another in that same series, General George Gordon Meade and Corps commanders at Gettysburg. Well, it's not the Corps commanders, it's General Meade and his staff. Well, I guess there's some Corps commanders in it. But on the back it says, this picture is a reproduction of the staff artist of the U.S. War Department, and the photograph's taken on June 29th, 1863, as General George Gordon Meade assumed command. Yeah. Can you imagine that? General Meade, I know you're kind of busy, marching towards Gettysburg, but hey, here, come on over here and get all your staff together. We're going to sit for a photograph. Again, this image is June of 1864, not Gettysburg. Now, ironically, in that same series, they put the 3 Confederate prisoners postcard in there, but it says Petersburg, Virginia. And that's a Gettysburg one. So, maybe there's an issue with sending these to Germany. But in this case, it seems like they're the ones who are making the mistakes, the publisher. There are some national companies that are producing Gettysburg postcards early on, and there are some locals. And, then we got these odd things, like a lot of my friends have one example of this particular company. I have, I think, 3, maybe 4. It's Cunningham and Brothers out of Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And they made one series of postcards. And a couple of mine have a divided back, and a couple of mine, the other 2 have undivided back. So they're making them around the time of the transition. So we'll say circa 1906, 1907. And they have some really neat ones. Devil's Den. It's interesting, on the Devil's Den cards, and I don't know who first started it, but there's a story that's told on the back of these Devil's Den cards. And it's usually the same story. And the story is that after the Battle of Gettysburg, the burial crews went to Devil's Den, and they pulled 68 bodies from the crevices of the rocks of Devil's Den. And I tell the story in my Devil's Den book. The one I wrote that Gary, put his name on somehow. I don't know. I just said that because it, will probably be filmed. But these 68 bodies had no indication of any wounds on them. And the logical conclusion was that with all the shells exploding around, the shells would explode inside the rocks where the men were hiding, and the concussion from the shell would blow out their eardrums. And these 68 men undoubtedly all died of concussion. And so here's a story that kind of seems to start on the back of postcards and just is told and retold, because the postcard companies just steal the descriptions of the postcards from each other. Here's another interesting one. This is getting my postcard makers mixed up here, but this is I think it's the Union News Company. I know there's an American news company I showed some from. Well, anyway, this particular company did a series of cards, and on their cards, they all say they're in the National Cemetery. So I like this card because it's unusual. You know, people are just shooting the same thing over and over again. The Soldiers National Monument in the cemetery, the high watermark, Warren on Little Round Top. You know, and it's good. It's nice to have an unusual card of another scene. So it shows the Bryan House when it had the huge addition onto it before it was restored. And it shows the tower on Cemetery Ridge and the 111th New York monument. So I really like that. But it's clearly not in the National Cemetery. But all their cards, once you realize that, all their cards say National Cemetery, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And that lady standing in the road, I don't know how many cards they have, maybe 20. She appears in all their cards. But here, see, she's over there. What's ironic is they do have a postcard of the National Cemetery in their collection, and it doesn't say National Cemetery. It says Gettysburg Battlefield. So I'm a little confused by their captions. Yeah, undoubtedly. And I appreciate the companies that actually have a photographer come to Gettysburg instead of just getting them from William Tipton or Jacob Mumper. So Gettysburg was in a perfect place for the emergence of the postcard. Because again, 1898 was the first postcards. 1901, they really started to come into American culture. And in 1895, the Gettysburg National Military Park had been formed. And we had gift shops and souvenir stands all over the town. And already local people were selling booklets with photographs in them prior to postcards being invented. Here's one of the early Battlefield View books. And you can see that it is down here. It says it's copyrighted by Chisholm Brothers of Portland, Maine. And, you know, it's kind of got some photographs that are turned into like lithographs of the battlefield in it. I just wanted to show you a page out of it. I should mention that I have a huge collection of Gettysburg souvenir booklets also. I got a lot of Gettysburg junk. But then, Chisholm Brothers started Portland, Maine. They started doing postcards. Look, again, made in Germany. And here's Hancock looking south. Now, they hired William Tipton to take their photographs. So you have this interesting thing. We got postcard printers, postcard publishers, postcard photographers. So there's like 3 different, corporations or companies involved in this. That's got to drive up the price of the card, don't you think? Here's one of William Tipton's books, and this one he did the photographs for, but it was copyrighted and published by J. Murray Jordan. I think Tipton's got to be careful if he sells photographs and lets somebody else copyright them, and then he wants to use them. So this book, I noticed, we don't have postcards from this book. It has a lot of good, unique views from it, though. So in this book, here we are on the tower on Cemetery Ridge, and I love it because we're not looking down Hancock Avenue. We're looking towards the town. We're looking across the Wax Museum and McDonald's and stuff right there. McDonald's is not there, and the Wax Museum. Remember, they picked up this house, I think, and moved it back. Is that the one that got moved? Maybe it's that one that got moved. It's near Long Lane. William Tipton himself did a little booklet Gettysburg, the pictures and the story. And it's a really good booklet and has lots of images in it. So here's the thing I'm getting at with them. Both Jacob Mumper and William Tipton already had a bunch of photographs of the battlefield. And so they can send those photographs to these printers and have postcards made, and then they're distributing postcards around the town. Tipton is more of a distributor of postcards than a publisher of postcards. But here's a view, and here's a postcard from William Tipton. So, you can tell that he just took that image and made a postcard out of it. I like it. Do you know why I like it? Of course, because it shows something that doesn't make any sense. Does anybody see something really strange in a postcard? Well, besides, the railroad tracks go through the middle of Gettysburg College campus, and remember, in 1992, they were moved onto the battlefield. Besides that, the road today goes around those monuments, not in front of them. It goes out and around. So, would I have known that road had been moved if it wasn't for this image? I don't know how, unless I was paying closer attention to one of the early maps, but I knew it because of this. I love Gettysburg College and how how did they know, if they're printing this in Germany, how did they know that building needs to be red? Because it's that brown, it's actually brown stone. It's that reddish brown stone that's used in buildings, Gladfelter Hall. Did someone send them instructions on what to color and how to color it? Probably. So here's another William Tipton early series of cards. And so he did his here. I think perhaps with the photographs, he can probably publish these himself and, distribute them around town. I don't know the printing process, or maybe he hired somebody to do it. You know what? This number almost suggests to me that it's a larger firm that was doing it for him. But I just wanted to show you this because we'll never have this view again. It's dominated today by the beavers. So I wanted to have a beaver view in there. Here, Plum Run is just, a little streamlet. And here's the back of the card. So you can kind of see that it obviously was after 1901, but there's no real anything on it that tells us more about it. William Tipton is very proud of the fact that he took this view. And I didn't put any examples in my show. I don't want to make it too long. But a bunch of other companies used the same view by Tipton. And Tipton would put copyrighted photograph by William Tipton. And you see, he says here, photo copyrighted by William H. Tipton, 1893. And I think 10 different companies have this view with that copyright on it. He was very proud of this. Do you know how he got this view? 1893. No, not the tower, although he did take one from the tower. The clue is the date, the New York State Memorial. When they were putting the New York State Memorial up and they were putting the Genesis of Liberty or whatever on top, he climbed up on the scaffolding of the New York State Monument and took this view. And this view would be used over and over and over again. Now, he had an earlier view he had taken from a derrick that had been placed where the water company for the, and I mentioned that in one of my videos, the water company for the Gettysburg Water Company like in 1883. So he previously had taken a farther away view of it, but this was his big view that he's very, very proud of. And, William Tipton, I've just shown some examples of his work. Here, he did some paintings, too, in the postcards. And they seem to work really well in color. I love this one again. This one is copyrighted in 1906. So it's the bridge near Big Round Top. This one has some defects in it. That's not his fault. It's my fault. And then I found this advertisement in the newspaper, 1909. And it tells us a couple interesting things. Lincoln did a Gettysburg Address postcard. And in it, he has the Gettysburg Address in full, and then the card contains a view of the Wills House where the address was written, the National Cemetery was delivered, and a portrait bust of Lincoln. And 5 cents per copy, now on sale at our store, and Bumballs newsstand. I don't even know what that is. I think it's on Chambersburg Street, though. And he says he has 500,000 Gettysburg cards in stock, 117 different views. So there, by 1909, he has 117 different postcards you can buy. Now, it's interesting. I did not have this view. So just a couple days ago, I contacted my friend Joe because I would look through my collection to see if I had any view that matched that, and I don't. And Joe, he has a larger collection than me, and he's the administrator for the Gettysburg and Postcards. And he looked through his collection, and he found exactly what it is. So there it is. And you can see there's the cemetery, there's the Wills House, there's the Gettysburg Address, and he had 2 versions of it. And there's Lincoln. It looks like kind of like on the penny. You know, it's interesting that when did the Lincoln penny come about? 1909. And this is 1909. Although that's not exactly, he didn't take that from the penny. That's probably based on a drawing, you know, that famous drawing that was used, or sketch for the penny. But isn't that fascinating that we actually can see the postcard that he's describing there? And, you know, people have, you know, that image. I don't have one. I have something else that I haven't seen another, though. An envelope from a William Tipton collection. He did a series called the TQ cards, Tipton Quality. And you can see there's 12 of them, and you have to pay 25 cents for the set. Again, what's that about? 2 cents each, 2 and something each. And you had to buy them together, sold only in full sets. And you had to buy them at the Eagle Hotel souvenir stand. Like that. Oh, yeah. 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 And of course, you may know that I wrote a book on William Tipton, and that photograph is in it, and it's downstairs. Yes. You know what? I was going to put that in the slideshow, and I did not. How could I not do that? But I love William Tipton's views here. And again, that's the same view that he had in another postcard, but these cameo views. The earliest date I have for one of these posted is 1911. So they're probably put out, you know, just before the 50th anniversary. And I really like them. Look, there's John Burns. I almost used that on my cover of the John Burns book. And looky here, Lee's headquarters. And to give you some proof that I've always collected postcards, did you know that William Tipton postcard is the front cover of my Lee's headquarters book? So I use that when on there. I don't think I really talk about that in my Lee's headquarters shows, that the front of the book is a William Tipton postcard, but I like it. Now, William Tipton has some beautiful views. And again, they're printed in Germany. And I think the TQ series says it's printed in Saxony. Now, I want to mention that in 1909, the United States passed a tariff on goods that were being brought in from other countries, and the postcard tariff was too much. And so a lot of people stopped ordering their postcards from Germany. And then World War I, we're at war with Germany. So there are no German published Gettysburg postcards, after about 1915. So then the United States has to start generating its own postcards. So the German ones are kind of early. I have seen Irish ones too, ones that are printed in Ireland. But here's another William Tipton. I got to have a Devil's Den one, right? And there's a Jenny Wade house. Got to have a Jenny Wade house. And Mumper. Mumper was the other big photographer in town during the period of tourism. And Jacob Mumper actually married one of the girls associated with the Kitzmillers who owned the Jenny Wade house. And eventually, Jacob Mumper has a souvenir stand in the Jenny Wade house. The Jenny Wade house was free, but when you went there, you got sold postcards. And he also has a photographic studio on Baltimore Street in the Fondestock building, 41 Baltimore Street. And you can see he's selling postcards. There's an early label of his from our collection here. And he had a book. Again, his brother-in-law was R.C. Miller. And in this particular booklet, you can see 1904, he's the custodian of the Jenny Wade house. And Mumper's running all the souvenirs out of the Jenny Wade house. They're brother-in-laws, those guys. And here, again, from his 1904 booklet, here's a view of monuments on Culp Hill, and then here's one of Mumper's postcards. Again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. These photographers already have photographs of the battlefield that they can send to publishers to send them back to Gettysburg. Can you imagine the amount of postcards that were sold like during the 1913 reunion around town? And here's a Devil's Den Mumper. You can see this photograph is from his book. I didn't put the image from his book in, but this photograph was taken not long after the government chiselers scratched the rock carvings off the rocks. You'll know that inside joke if you've been on Gary and I's Devil's Den tours. And then we have other local companies that got into the act as time went by. So I think after the United States started publishing their own cards, we enter what I think postcard collectors call the white border era. In the from the mid-teens until the late 1920s. And Blocker's Jewelry Store was a main publisher of cards. And there's a few hundred cards by Blockers. Oh, it's probably Bluchers. I do not know anybody. I didn't know anybody with that name. I always called it Blockers. But there's a bus driver who used to be with the tour center, and I remember his name was Dave Blucher. So maybe it's Bluchers. I don't know if anybody's local enough to remember it. I think it went out of business in the 50s. But you can see there is the Union Hotel and the Sign of the Buck today. And the Dobbin House, or I'm sorry, I said Dobbin House tonight. Blue Parrot Tea Room. The Blue Parrot. You like they had a sign with a blue parrot on it? Yeah. Now it's a Gettysburger, right? But Blockers or Bluchers published postcards, and they did something a lot of other people did also. They published a book with all their postcards in it. Boy, are these great for collectors. I don't know how many other postcard collectors also collect souvenir booklets like me, but you can get a souvenir booklet, and in the booklets are all the ones they produced in a series, and it becomes like a checklist for that company. And so this is a Blucher's booklet. Penrose Myers was another jeweler, and he had a shop on Baltimore Street. And I think he opened up a shop in 1876. I think he was a little boy during the battle. And his wife, she lived on Chambersburg Street during the battle. But he eventually opened up a souvenir stand on Oak Ridge, I think about the time of the 1938 reunion. Can you imagine a crowd of 200,000 people to hear, Franklin Delano Roosevelt give the Gettysburg Address, and he's got a refreshment stand right there. How did he get his refreshment stand right there? I imagine on the other side of that stone wall from the park, hey, I'd imagine that's private property at that time, right on the other side. So he's just right next to the tower and the park. And the park has a parking lot for the tower that acts as a parking lot for a souvenir stand. and he sells his own postcards, Penrose Myers. And this is definitely one of the premier postcards that people strive to buy. And this one, when I was putting this postcard show together, I couldn't find my original. So I just stole this one off the internet because it's on eBay occasionally. But look at that. And, I wonder, he breaks a hole in the stone wall. And I wonder if that was already there, or he conveniently did that. I don't know what the park would say about that today. But here's his postcard he made up to sell during the Eternal Light Peace Memorial dedication, since the monument wasn't there already, there. So it was around that time that he opened the stand up. I don't remember the exact date. Now, I wanted to show Blucher's. I think I got this a little bit out of order. So in the 1920s, we had what we called the white border era, where there's a white border around images. And then in the late 1920s and the early 1930s through the 1940s and into the 50s, there was something called the linen card. And I think that there was these publishers that you could send them an image. They would colorize it themselves. How do they know what color something is? And then they would do it very cheaply. And then you could sell them for less money and make more money on them. But some of these companies had a series of the white border cards, or, Tipton had the early cards, the white border cards, and then the linen cards. Tipton died in 1929, by the way. And, there was a time when Blucher and Tipton were business partners. So sometimes you see things say Tipton and Blucher on them. But they took this image, and they probably sent the photograph, and they sent it to one of these companies, I think in Boston. And this was the result. Well, first of all, I wanted to show you the back of this, because it talks about the wheat field and the whirlpool of battle and how horrible the deadly confusion was. And I often tell people that the wheat field is the bloodiest spot in the bloodiest day of the bloodiest battle, in the bloodiest war in American history. So I think they misunderstood when they printed this card. And again, this is a card that all Gettysburg postcard collectors strive to own. The flower garden in the wheat field. Ridiculous. And I wanted to show you that a linen card. Now, we handed out linen cards to everybody. And some of the linen cards, I love it. I think there's 4 different companies that they number them. So you know if you have them all or if you're missing one. And I appreciate the numbers on them. This is a company out of Frederick, I believe, this card. Maybe that's a blocker. That's a blocker, Blucher blocker. But there's a company out of Frederick that has numbered cards too. And the cards that you have are from Bookmart. So Bookmart was owned by Nicholas Meligakis. He was a Greek. A Greek immigrant, came to the United States in 1914, came to Gettysburg in 1922, opened up a shop next to the Plaza restaurant called Sweetland. He sold candy, and soon after, he sold souvenirs. And then he eventually bought the Plaza, and in 1948, I believe it was, he opened up Bookmart, and he started selling Gettysburg Souvenir booklets. I have a clearer version of this in our archives. We have the original negative, but I'm curious to exactly, I know that book, Robert Fortenball's book on Abraham Lincoln, but I can't identify all the stuff in his shop. But you can see, look what he says. is the place to visit for gifts, books, and souvenirs. There is no other shop in the southeastern part of Pennsylvania that can match the selection of books, especially on the Civil War. Wouldn't you have loved to go there? Okay. And here is Bookmart produced a series of linen cards. Some of the cards on the back, if you look at your card later, it says Bookmart. And some of them say Nicholas Melegakis, or N.A. Melegakis, I think. So the owner of the store. So he died in 1980. And in 1992, Loring Schultz at the Farnsworth House bought from someone his stock of postcards that he had left in his shop. Isn't that awesome? So I have thousands. Each box holds 1,000. And that's, why we sell them here and why we gave you postcards. Of course, we're hoping that you'll want to start your own postcard collection and start by buying postcards downstairs out of our gift shop, because we have other ones. You can buy the whole Nicholas Melegakis series. You're probably wondering, how does Adam County Historical Society have a bunch of antique postcards that date probably from the Sweetland area? They could be as early as 19... well, one of them is the Peace Light, so they got to be after 38. But there's no dates on them. But they're probably from the 40s. And, individual postcards were available at different companies around the town. So each business might just place an order with a postcard manufacturer for one card, their business. They don't have to do a series. And it's impossible to know how many of these cards are out there. But I have a wide selection here. I just wanted to show you some examples from my collection. Obviously, the Gettysburg National Museum, the National, it was called for many years, the Rosenstiel Museum. It was started in 1921. There were 14 different editions placed on it over the years. And I'm sure everybody remembers the electric map. This is prior to the electric map. The electric map was 1939. But when I went there, I loved their gift shop. And I bought postcards. Each of the postcard companies also has a souvenir folder. And in the folder, you fold it out, and they have every one of their postcards. So again, you can get an idea of the postcards of each company. So even though we've never had, like I said, a published checklist, I kind of made my own when I was a kid. And I love postcard folders. Have you even considered how many of these different postcard folders there might be? My favorite was the little wooden, I think I have 4 of those with different, one of them, of course, has Jenny Wade. I should have put the Jenny Wade one in here. But inside, when you open it up, there are little teeny postcards. And this is a little box of miniature postcards. And here, these are large ones. And some of these are tear away. I think these two, like you open the booklet and you tear the postcard out and then you can send it. So, but the souvenir folders are you just open them up and the cards fall out. I like these little spiral bound books too. And theoretically, they're complete sets. But they were always adding to their stuff. And you know what? I have twice as many as these that I just put in there. I just did that this morning, threw some of them down so you could see them. And the postcard companies change hands. Like I just mentioned, Melegakis, someone else owned those postcards for a while. I don't know if they sold them around town. And then Loring Schultz, and now the Historical Society sells them. A guy named George Bowl lived around town, and he did a series of postcards in the 1930s. And they were real photo postcards, but, made, mass-produced instead of the ones that are just a single. And then he did linen cards, and then he did 1950s really nice color photographs. He died in 1951. Leroy Smith bought his postcards and reissued them under his name. And then Leroy Smith went on to publish like some 300 different cards on his own, many of those large colored cards in the 1960s and 1970s. He died in 1987, I believe, and then Americana Souvenirs took over, and they published a couple hundred more cards. So there's a lot of cards out there that were published around Gettysburg by these local distributors, but they weren't printing them in Gettysburg. They were printing them in California or, in Boston and wherever they could get them cheaply made. And, I just put some of the more modern cards in here because in the show, because then modern cards to me seem to be dominated by beautiful nature landscapes. That's most of the theme of the large format. And when I say modern cards, I'm talking about from the 70s and 80s and when I was collecting them. I did really make it a habit to go around and every time a new batch of cards came out to buy the newer ones. There's a National Tower. I was going to put a National Tower card in here and I did not. I feel bad about that. And L.E. Smith, and then Americana Souvenirs later, had a little booklet. And the booklet, I put a postcard on it, was just his postcard views. So these things aren't new. He probably picked up one of the older books and say, hey, people are just taking their postcards and make a booklet out of it. Let's do that. Yeah. And, sunsets seem to be what photographers like the most. One of those is a sunrise. I hate to tell them. It's all right. But I love the color that in some of these modern views. And it became, the sun and the cannon became a big theme. And I remember this one. This one's actually from the 90s. And this one, you see how the sun, it makes it look like a cannon's firing. And this one is from the late 70s, and this was sold at the Cyclorama in a long strip of cards. And I think this is the most successful one. And this is a 3-inch ordnance rifle, I believe, on Cemetery Ridge, looking towards the North Carolina monument. And then, the problem is with some of these modern cards is they create a transparency negative, and they send it to have it published. And then the publisher doesn't know which side, to print. So in this particular case, you can see Gettysburg is right, but it's put onto a backwards image, a transposed image of Little Round Top. See the 44th New York Castle's on the wrong side of the hill? Don't you just love stuff? I have a couple more of these I could show, but you wouldn't. It would take, some knowledge to know they're backwards. But that's great. No corrected version. The postcard company doesn't take their postcards back and reprint them. Don't you wish they would do it? And then destroy the ones, leaving only a few rare examples like the inverted Jenny that we could claim were worth a lot of money. No, they mass produce the bad ones too. So here is the Eternal Light Peace Memorial when it had the light bulb on it. Remember during the oil embargo in 1973, they turned off the Eternal Light Peace Memorial. And then in 76, they put a light bulb on top of it. And it wasn't until 1988 that they extinguished the light bulb and put the flame back. Do you know all that? We have a video about that whole thing on our YouTube channel. It just came out about a month ago. And then, of course, my favorite modern postcard. I do tours at a battlefield, and I see this all the time. Bluebirds making nests in the cannon barrels. And, of course, if I have a group of 8th graders, I always say something like, these cannons were made by man, specifically for one purpose, to kill and to rip lives from men. And today, all around our national parks, the same exact cannon barrels are being used as birds' nests, and they give life, something for which they were specifically not designed. Sometimes on the tours with the 8th graders, I have to entertain myself. Then if I'm in a bad mood, I'll make them write a poem after that. So, during the postcard era, every time a new monument came, like, the Virginia Memorial, it was a big event. So the postcard makers made a new postcard so they could sell it. And you know what? A lot of times they took it before the monument was really ready, and they had it for sale in the crowd during the dedication. And you might not know this, but the Pennsylvania Monument went up in 1910, but it wasn't until 1913 that they put the statues around the base of the monument. So early Pennsylvania Monument postcards they don't have the statues there. They don't know that there's going to be statues added later. So, and it was dedicated on September 27th, 1910, something like that. The cyclorama came to Gettysburg in 1913 during the 50th anniversary, the Boston cyclorama. It was on Baltimore Street, and you can see we have cyclorama postcards. I really like them trying to get the blood on the horses, make it more dramatic, some blood and some people. And here's a really cheaply made cyclorama postcard. Sometimes, I'm not talking about all the companies. There were, perhaps 40 different companies that made series of cards, and there was a bunch of cards made by the individual businesses. And in 1925, they redid the front of the Catholic Church, and here, Blucher, he did a postcard of the St. Francis. The Eagle Hotel had their own postcard, and that's where the 7-Eleven now is. And this is about 1913, and you can see the trolley tracks in front of it. Here's the Globe, or what later became known as Lincoln Way West Hotel, and that's what's it called? The Nerd Herd. And see the alley there where you walk down? Yeah. And then, there's lots of postcards for places where you could stay in town. And I love these because we don't have sometimes a record of all the different bed and breakfasts that were once in town. Here's Wolf's Lodging, 75 cents, free garage, hot bath. That's on, says 4 blocks north of Center Square. Here is the Blythe Tourist Home, 204 Carlisle Street. My friend Howie lives here. So this is the Methodist Parsonage on Baltimore Street. There's another tourist home, 75 cents. This is the Rose Garden Tea Room and Cabins. That looks like a really nice place to stay, doesn't it? It's there from like the 1920s to, I think it closed down, I'm trying to think in 1980, something like that. The park tore, maybe it's the 70s, the park bought it and tore down the buildings. It was near the Eisenhower farm. And then, every once in a while, I'll find a new card. This one actually came from the Sheeds family here on our postcard site. I had another view of the same building, but the Lorraine Lodge. And then, of course, immediately what I do is I drive out and see if the building still stands. It said 3 miles out Route 30 East. I thought I saw a building that looked really strange like that, and there it is. It's still there. You see the cement pad where the gas station used to be? There's a little gas station out front. Now, I took this view based on another postcard that I have, not the one I just showed, but I like that one better. The Sunken Gardens on Route 30 East. For homework, ride out Route 30, and you'll come upon the Lincoln Logs on your right. You know where the Lincoln Logs restaurant used to be? It's still there. Look to the left, and you'll see these little huts are still there down below Route 30, little sunken garden area happening there. The Peace Light Inn and tourist cabins. I like collecting the individual postcards whenever I find them, just a record of the various businesses around. My favorite, of course, I used to stop there as a kid, the Shields Gettysburg Camp Park. There from like 1921. I think the park bought it, I think 1983. And you see where it is. There's the Reynolds and Beaufort monuments. They had cabins there. The Peace Light up behind it were right at the end of Stone Avenue. But it was a museum, and always stopped there to buy a soda. And the Dobbin House, before the Dobbin House, was the Battlefield diorama. Did anybody else go in the diorama? Very good. It was nice. And how about the Horse and Buggy Museum? They had 200 different buggies. On the Harrisburg Road, it was at the Josiah Benner Farm. That barn still stands. The Horse and Buggy Museum. And I forget the years, but I think it's 1950s until 1967. Fort Defiance. Boy, did I like Fort Defiance on the Tawnytown Road. Yeah, did you go there? I loved it. And I got their postcard. And even modern things like that, you got to think about this. Like here, I got this off the rack at the Avenue Restaurant. It's no more. What's it? Maize noodles. And there's still postcards around you could buy. And the Sign of the Buck, the owners decided to, when you go to the Sign of the Buck and you buy dinner, they give you, along with your check, a postcard. And, I was there not too long ago, and I asked if I could have all the different postcards. So I got 4 of them. I didn't know how many they published, but they're publishing postcards there. And of course, we publish postcards here to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the movie Gettysburg, and we sell them downstairs. And just yesterday, wasn't it? Yesterday morning, we got a new shipment of Adams County Historical Society postcards in, including highlights from our museum. So we have some new postcards for sale downstairs. I think that's it. So I want to thank everybody for coming to our program.